Hello, everyone. My name is Oluwadamilola Okeyoyin. So today I'm going to just talk about the intersectionality between racism and mental health. So we can't talk about, issues like this without talking about equity. And every time this topic comes to my head, I don't think about equality, I think about equity. I don't know if anyone does the same thing. And that's because I just think that equality doesn't cover everything that, this whole topic is trying to encompass. And obviously, we know what equity and equality, we know what that addresses. And obviously, that is inequalities. And this can come in different shapes and forms. It can be it's up there. It can be social, it can be economic. It's all types of marginalization. And the role of equity is to address marginalization. And to be fair, when I think about marginalization, I think it's the worst thing that anybody can do to another person. So I really don't want to give you my own definition of what I think it is. I'm just going to just say what's up there on the screen. So, racism. It's quite interesting that we still have to define what it is, and I'm not going to define it because I feel like it's, everyone should know what it is, and I just feel like it's something that is a part of so many people's lives, like the wrong side of people's lives. So I don't think anyone should be racist or should show racism to people, but it's something that a lot of people go through daily, and I'm not going to define it. And mental health. So most times people think when you have a mental health issue, they say, oh, I have bad mental health. And that's right, but the same way you have physical health is the same way you have mental health. And the same way you take care of yourself when you're sick, you go to the hospital, it's the same way you have to take care of yourself when you have mental health issues. And there is an intersectionality between racism and mental health issues because nothing is distinguishable, because when you experience racism, it affects your mental health, and it's going to be really, really wrong for us to try to put that separately. So there is a massive intersect between racism and mental health. So there's so many things that can happen when you experience racism. I'm Nigerian, and I've been in the UK for a couple of years now, and when you first experience racism, it might hit you like a ton of bricks because you don't expect it. Most especially because I come from somewhere that was colonized by Britain. So I think, oh, is this racism? Is it not racism? Is this what I experience typically, or is this different? So there's a lot of things that come to your mind when you experience, different types of discrimination. And sometimes people say, oh, it might be a microaggression, but I think it's full-on aggression. I think there's nothing as, oh, it's micro, or you shouldn't react to it. But the fact that it's happened and the fact that it's a behavioral response to something, it is full-on aggression to me. So when we internalize racism, it cuts across, it takes over your whole life. I don't know how to explain that. So when you have someone be treating you differently to how you would typically experience or to what you are typically, you internalize some things. And for example, how you present yourself. So it can be subconscious, it can be conscious bias. For example, growing up, there's this saying in my language, I'm Yoruba by tribe, and growing up, my aunts used to say, oh, Omo Pupa, Toti Domo Dudu, I would translate. It basically means a fair child that's become dark. And I used to wonder, is it because I'm dark-skinned? But it was a massive problem because apparently if you are dark-skinned, it means you are not as beautiful or as pleasing to what societal standards are. So imagine growing up and you think you look all good, you're all dressed up, and someone is just like, you're too dark, or you're darker than what you typically should be. It makes you become very, very conscious of who you are and like what you can give society. Another thing is you try to assimilate, you try to fit into what the stereotype is. For example, you have people relaxing their hair. I came here with my braids today for a reason. And you have people, trying to change how they are, how they should present themselves because they want to be appealing to what is the norm. So those are some of the things that happen when you experience racism and when you internalize the trauma that comes as a result of that. Another thing is, code switching. So Code switching is a part of my life, and I'm going to use myself as an example. So this is how I sound normally, but then when I'm with my Nigerian friends and we're speaking Pidgin, Pidgin is like a West African form of Creole that we speak because it's a mixture of different languages as a result of colonization, but let's not go into that. So when I'm speaking Pidgin with my friends, I sound differently. So I'm like, oh, hey, my guy, how are you, how far? If I'm speaking my language, which is Yoruba, I sound totally different. And I'm here, I sound totally different. But then you see, like in some spaces, they think, oh, you should probably sound more British than you probably are, and sound, oh, hi, hello, everyone, my name is, but that's not me, and I'm not going to sound like that person, because that just sounds very fake. Imagine I come up here and I'm trying to sound British when I'm not British. So this is something that happens to a lot of people, where you try to just, you don't want your authentic self to come out because you think you might be judged, or you might be ridiculed, or someone might laugh at you because of the way you sound or the way you pronounce certain words. And it is because of internalized racism. One other thing is, most times people are cut off from their culture and from their own identity. And sometimes people are embarrassed about what they are and where they come from. It might be that, or it might be because you don't actually know where you come from. So, for example, I'm Nigerian. We're colonized for over, 500 years. We were taught British history in school. So you go to school and you're being taught what's happening in Britain. And then you come to Britain and it's totally different, but let's not even go into that. So you're not taught about your history. Your sense of identity, your sense of belonging was stripped and taken away from you. So you don't even know who you are as a person. So how can you, if you don't know where you're coming from, how do you know where you're going? And that is a saying I just translated in Yoruba to English right now. And it basically means that if you don't know what your history is, you have no idea where you're going to go to and how you're going to get there. So it is something that happens to a lot of people. It happened to me as well, because so many times, like in Nigeria, for example, when you go to work, you have to dress the British way, the British standard. You have to wear the suits and all of that. And then you come to England and everyone is wearing whatever they want to wear. And it's quite interesting that so many, the standard that has been put by people, not even because of, let's say, colonization and all of that, but the standard that is still maintained is as a result of the internalized, hatred we probably have for each other, where if you wear your traditional wear, they think, oh, you don't fit the dress code. You can get sent back home. I remember in secondary school, you were not allowed to speak your language in school because it's seen as speaking vernacular. So you always have to speak English. If a teacher catches you speaking Yoruba, if I'm speaking Yoruba with someone else that is Yoruba, you get punished for speaking your language. And this is something that is normal, it is the way of life. So the extent that you don't even know how to speak your language, and then when you then try to learn your language, you're probably old and thinking, is this the right time to actually even start learning this language? So these are some of the issues that come about from internalized racism. And another thing is racial trauma. So I put 3 different types of racial traumas up on the screen. And the first one, is you can feel depression or anger. And this is something that I have felt personally, because I think the first one was rage, not even anger. I think anger is kind of minimalizing what I felt. It's rage, and I think it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be enraged, because when I think about, oh my goodness, there's so many things I have to learn and unlearn, there is so much anger and depression that comes out of that. You can also feel, you can also be hypervigilant. So, for example, I mentioned, when people say microaggression, I call it full-on aggression, right? Sometimes people might say certain things or react a certain way, and my head is just there like, oh my God, what exactly did I just experience? What exactly is happening here? And most times I'm right, but then sometimes it might just be because this is your lived experience. This is my experience every day. I'm thinking, oh, is someone going to say something that is going to trigger me right now? And how best am I going to respond to it? I have to start thinking of how to defend myself in my head, even before I get attacked. So it's something that a lot of people that come from marginalized backgrounds have to deal with. So that's why we have to be very careful how we, interact with people, because you really don't know what's happening in their heads, and you really don't know how they're going to react to certain things that are being said, or, different attitudes that they might perceive from different people. The best one, avoidance. And this is something that I used to do, because you really don't want to be, oh, she's that person that always brings up issues, or if this is happening. You want to just avoid certain situations because you don't want to upset people. Well, my own experience, I've realized that that doesn't work, because if you avoid the issue, you're just going to get, more depressed, and it's going to affect your mental health. So it's something that you avoid because you don't want another person to feel bad. And one thing that made this stand out to me was when I was doing my master's, and I had this friend, like there was a whole experience that happened, and I told her she's British, and when I narrated what happened to her, she literally sat down and was crying for like 30 minutes. And I was just there like, why are you crying this hard? Because I didn't realize what had happened to me. So it took her, being so expressive and breaking it down, me telling her and her experiencing, like thinking about what I've been through, for me to actually understand that what happened was a massive issue. Because for me, I've avoided such things my whole life that I'm just like, oh, okay, it's happened. I'm just going to ignore it and avoid it. But that experience made me realize that, okay, this is something that should not be avoided. It's something that we should not just brush aside because it's our experience. And then the best one, low self-esteem. Most times you try to just minimalize yourself, or try to make yourself smaller so that you fit into whatever boxes that have been created for you, because you don't want to occupy space. You don't want to be that loud black woman, but unfortunately, I'm not going to fit into such spaces. You get told aggressive, or you're talking about these issues too much. Don't you think you should calm down? I hate that word. Like, why would you tell me to calm down? Don't tell me to calm down. If I want to be upset, let me be upset. If I want to be angry, let me be angry. Let me express the emotions that I feel, and don't try to make me feel like me expressing how I feel is not acceptable in a certain space. And all of that can make you feel, low about yourself, can make you have low self-esteem. For example, growing up, I gave you the analogy before where they say, like, fair child has become dark child. And when I went to college, and even when I was in secondary school back in Nigeria, I had this thing where if, let's say, I'm standing with my friends and we're getting approached by guys, I just take a step back and just try to stay in the background, because you're always called like the ugly black friend. And because you're dark skinned, people think, oh, you're not as pretty as your friends that are lighter than you or fair skinned than you. So it's something that I always had to deal with. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to just fade into the background, because I really don't want to have to deal with the mental stress that comes out of, your friends being approached and you not being approached because you're dark skinned. It's something that's happened my whole life. So for me, coming here to this country, like let's say 9 years ago, the same thing still happened. Like, I started becoming, just fading into the background, because I really don't want to be up in people's faces, just because they already it caused the low self-esteem that I had. And I see it as low self-esteem that I had, because it might not necessarily translate to what those people are thinking, but it's because of what I felt about myself. So, racism can traumatize you even if you don't go through it. For example, I told you about my friend. She was traumatized the whole semester. And anytime she saw the person that was involved in the story of what happened to me, she was so enraged. And she would just be so upset. And I'm like, just relax. Because if you're this upset that I don't really know what reaction I should be having, maybe I should full on go, let's fight this out or something. Because at that point, and that's the thing. For example, we have what happened to George Floyd a couple of years past. And even if I'm not in the United States, I'm just thinking, me being a black woman, imagine I go to the States and someone decides, oh, okay, I'm just going to, grab a gun, and because you look different or because you act different. It is trauma that even if you don't experience it, like if it's not your lived experience, you can get affected by it as well. And that's why I think it's a collective, it's something that we all have to address as human beings. Like it's not one person's problem, like it's our collective issue. So I've mentioned George Floyd's what happened in America, and that is a form of trauma. Another form of trauma can be because of what your group has experienced. For example, I mentioned that I'm Nigerian, and we were colonized, and for years, different people tried colonizing us, but then the British succeeded. So hence why we speak English. And most times when I think about, or because I do a lot of reading, and I try to learn about history a lot, and I uncover the evil, I call it evil because it was evil, that was done to my people, it makes me so upset. Because I'm wondering, like, how would you treat another person this way? Some people might say, oh, it was years ago, we should not. But the fact that it happened is a massive issue for me. The fact that people could actually think this is right to treat people this certain way is very upsetting. To think what happened in Congo, what happened in Congo to the Congolese people, where your arms get chopped up if you don't bring in the quota of cocoa you're meant to bring in. The fact that that can be done to another person really, really traumatized me and traumatized a lot of people that I speak to, because when you try to start to understand what happens to your tribe, what your ancestors went through, it makes you so upset. Because apart from the fact that, thankfully I wasn't there, but they had to survive that for me to be here, and that is absolutely horrifying. Another form of trauma is intergenerational trauma. And this is passed down from generation to generation. And do you know the most amazing thing? As a person, you can have all of the different types of trauma combined together in one person. Because when you think about, for example, I'm going to use my family because that's the only experience that I have as an example. The way that my dad's experience, like going to schools and all of that, where you have to be stoic, you have to call your dad sir, your mom ma. All of that is trauma that was passed down to us as well. And that's because they had to call, the masters, or we still even call them masters in Nigeria, those that are in schools. But it's generational trauma that is passed on. And when we talk about, slavery in America as well, it's intergenerational trauma that is being passed on. And interestingly, it can be embedded in your DNA. So when we are talking about trauma, or we're talking about issues like this, it's not because people just want to be funny, or people are just trying to, make some certain people feel uncomfortable. Because we all have to feel uncomfortable. It's not one person to feel uncomfortable. So, back to mental health. How do you support your mental health? I've mentioned earlier, it's everyone's responsibility, and we need to take care of each other, like we should be our brother's keeper. If anyone's experiencing anything that you see that this is not right, you need to stand up for each other. For me, the major thing that I did was seek therapy, because I realized that I was just like one angry person walking around. So imagine me just walking around. Any little thing is just going to trigger me. And I was very, very upset. So I had to seek therapy because even though there is marginalization in therapy as well, when you try to access mental health as a person of color, there's a lot of other barriers that you face, but I'm not going to go into that. It's very important to seek therapy and to just know that you have to contribute to the change that you want to see. You have to make sure that the anger that you feel is translated to something. For example, that's what drives my passion of equity. Because of the anger that I have, I started a company that makes cosmetic products, so hair and body care products for dark skin, because I'm like, I don't want any other person to think their skin or their hair is not acceptable. You know what? I'm going to make products that can cater to that. So your anger, it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to have that anger, but direct that anger to something positive. So that is the end of my talk. And I'm going to say Esheun. Esheun in my language means thank you, and thanks for listening to me. Thank you.